Pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You have roll call?
Mrs. Ellison? Here. Mrs. Matthews? Dr. Vastitis?
Here.
Mr. Kennebone?
Here.
Mr. Riley? Mr. Vandenberg?
Here.
Dr. Volcano?
Present.
Mr. Ryder?
Yes.
Mr. Fano?
On the agenda tonight for our standing committee meeting will be finance because of obviously the budgetary concerns and putting the budget together. So I'm going to put Mike Simonetta in charge of that. Mike, you had obviously the property tax rebate, but prior to that, you have a couple things to update us on.
Yeah, we'll go through the two items on the agenda. I have a couple other items very quickly that are time sensitive and I would request to be on the next week's agenda, and I'll explain it as well. But first of all, on the property tax rebate program on Tuesday's agenda, we'll be asking the board to approve this program again, as we do every year. You received the information. If there's any questions, I'll try to answer them. Okay?
Mr. Simonetta, is there any substantive difference in the program this year versus past years?
No. Okay. Item B, the fuel oil bids. Again, the IU organized these bids, and sent out, you saw the attached is the result of the request for bids. And we will be asking to participate and award the number 2 fuel oil to Tally Petroleum, award the biodiesel to Tally Petroleum, and award the unleaded 89 octane to Consumer Tank, PAPCO. Any questions on the results of the bid?
Is there a reason why it's 89 versus 87?
I don't know. It did go up from the previous year, and they did not explain why it went up. Oh, you mean the octane versus the price?
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry, I was looking at I was actually concerned about the price going up so much from last year.
Well, I'm concerned about that too, but I don't know what kind of vehicles we have that need a high test or the plus.
Well, you know, I'm going to have to get back to you on that answer, on why. I know that's the octane that we have been using, and I don't know if there are certain vehicles that require that. And I also look at the bid specs, and I don't know if that was even spec'd out for me. So if the board's okay, I will respond to that in the Friday update.
Mr. Simonetta, while you make the call to the IU, if you could just ask, I noticed when we looked at all the companies that had the chance to bid on it, I didn't really see any local companies. We have some oil companies right here in the area. Can you just check how many, how many local companies were given an opportunity to bid?
Well, I mean, just understanding the bid process, it's advertised. I don't know if they reach out specifically to local companies because it's countywide, so every town would have their own local company, but I can certainly inquire.
It's a consortium.
It's
That is.
it's through the IU consortium, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the IU handles all the bids.
No, I understand that. I just wanted to know because I think we had one company from Whitehall, and then we had companies from a couple states away, so I was just wondering, I know we have a lot more oil companies than just Whitehall, so I wanted to see if locally, not specifically just Easton, because I know other schools are involved, but just to see if they had any other looks locally.
We'll do.
Thank you.
We'll see if they were sent bids and requested bids and why they did not respond.
And Mr. Simonetta, also, if I remember in past years, I asked the same question about the octane, and some of our vehicles do need the higher octane, and that's why it's 89 versus 87.
Yeah, and I don't know if you
how
did,
many, but I know that there are vehicles we have that need the higher octane. to run properly.
But with the fleet, this size, it would
Right.
vary, and I don't know if the bid can be varied.
Yeah.
And we can do both because we have the one tank, but I'll
Right.
look into it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's minor, it's only a few that need the lower one, then, I don't know if we could split it up, but if it could be split up and we could bid two for 87 and 89, that might be helpful. But I know in the past it's been 89 that the IU has bid. Okay.
Okay. Okay, before we get into the budget, I do have a couple items to bring up for discussion. One is we'll be asking the board to continue with the senior citizens tax rebate program. The applications are due April 15th, and we'd like to put that on the agenda next week for the 16th, to continue that program. We also have, if you recall, it's been a while, but we contracted with a firm, a requirement from the refinancing of the bonds, IRS requirements. We have to do the post-issuance compliance manual, procedures manual. We now have that document in hand, very cumbersome. It's a monitoring of the arbitrage for the refinancing. I will send this home in the packet for anybody that wants to read it. But basically, this is a requirement, and we would need to approve this procedures manual at the next board meeting.
Do you mean posted to board docs or private?
Yes.
Yes, oh yeah, I will make copies, it'll be on the board. Two other items that have come up in the last couple of days that are of time concern are regarding the projects that are being done this summer. One is at the masonry project for Paxenosa. We are requesting to approve the project monitoring firm of John E. Harry. It is part of the budgeted projection for the project. The number came in, it's about $17,500 for this firm who has worked with us in the past to do the project monitoring for the masonry reconstruction at Paxenosa Middle School. And that project, they've already started to set up shop and get ready to go. So we want to move forward with that and keep that project, get that project started so we can get as much done as we can before school starts next summer.
I have a question about it. Can you explain to me the difference between a project monitoring firm and our our engineering firm who we pay to oversee?
Well, it's almost like and Mr. Spatafora is in the audience from doing, to help explain as well, but it's also, come on, Mike, if you
The
would.
difference between the two is he is for testing and quality.
Can you use the microphone, please?
John Harry was a firm that we used on March when we did the masonry repairs there. It's for testing and quality assurance for the masonry only. He's not overseeing the project. It's the testing and the quality assurance for the masonry specific items only. So we wanted to, he did a good job for us with March, and with being as invasive as it was, it's very specialized testing. We just wanted to continue to have him on board with that. These are not samples that we can take like we do with paving or compaction tests. They need to be done in place. So to have him on site, I think his contract is for once a week during the project to be able to see the mortar testing and sand mixes and components that are going to go into that project. So he's not managing the project, testing only.
If I said
Okay.
managing, I misspoke, but also, can you explain, if you would, explain why you would have a firm besides doing that?
This is specialized only to the masonry. I don't know if how familiar you are with Paxenosa. Those walls are solid brick, 2 foot thick. There's a lot of issues that could potentially happen once they open those walls. The mortar makeup that we're going to use on the lower level block where the precast units are versus the brick units up top, and then the masonry caps up on top. Some are going to be caulk joints, some will be mortar joints, some will be a soft mortar joint. So we kind of would like to have his expertise on, especially a historic building like that, we're gonna find some interesting issues, I think, once we open that, so,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you.
And the other item is for the high school roof project, Phase 3, the asbestos abatement, and that was part of the plan and the project. Dewey Engineering solicited quotations, and Sargent Enterprises was the lowest bid. And I'll have this all in the, as part of the agenda in the packet, at $10,224 for the asbestos abatement project for the roof at the high school that's going down this summer. Any questions?
Phase 3.
Okay. All right.
I do have something, Mike, on for next week's agenda, all those projects, could they be all lumped together so we could vote on them as a group?
What project?
Well, the ones you just mentioned,
Well, it's a separate contract for the asbestos abatement,
yeah.
and then it's a separate project, a contract for the masonry.
No, what I'm saying is, they're all gonna fall under like summer programs or whatever.
Mhm.
So we could go and say,
We could.
under summer programs, A to F, you know, and vote on them that way. Unless somebody wants to pull one out and, you know, vote on it separately.
Sure.
Because that has worked pretty good, since we know that what they are,
Mhm.
and we know they're needed.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Good. Mhm. Thank you. Okay. Update on the Easton Area School District preliminary budget. What we're presenting tonight is a very quick look at where we were, just a refresher, and what the district has done to try to bridge the gap, to come into the three scenarios that we talked about last meeting, which was at a tax impact of 2.1%, 1.7, and of course 0. You'll see different options being presented. So just as a quick reminder, the first draft that was presented in November and again in January, we had a budget increase of approximately $4.5 million, or a 3.4% increase. And again, we talked about reducing, we had a $4.2 million budget gap. And we talked about ways to reduce it, to bridge the gap to those three areas. So, the recommendation from the administration is as follows. First, for getting to the 2.1% tax increase, we would be looking at staff reduction of 23 staff, 12 professional, 7 support, 1 in the central office, the assistant superintendent's position, and 3 in the Act 93 areas. We would be looking to reduce the extra pay for extra duty, cut that in half. That's a $180,000 budget item. And we would work with the schools to make the programs as consistent as possible among all the buildings. One thing to be clear, and I think I mentioned it last meeting, is that the late runs would still stay intact to maintain the existing programs. In the restructured category, we were working with some of the contracted services. We're going to reduce some of the services. Some of those included Kids Peace contract, and some other areas in professional contracted services. We are taking, not taking a chance, we are comfortable that we can reduce the tuition reimbursement account, given the last couple of years, of expenditures. And we talked about the substitute account, where we had to increase the original budget significantly based on previous year's expenditures. We reduced that somewhat for the purposes of balancing the budget. The other area that we talked about was the technology. We have, we're looking at not redoing the elementary lease as we originally proposed, and turning the technology program, instead of every 3 years, work towards a 4-year schedule. We would start with next year, thus reducing a budgeted line item of almost $400,000. And just have 1 year, and then do the elementary lease next year, and then do with a 4-year lease payment, which would reduce the yearly thing, and then follow through with the high school and middle school lease. So put us on a 4-year cycle. Some negatives to that, of course. One of them financially would be the resale of the equipment. Obviously, after 3 years, they're worth a little more than after 4 years. But given our situation, we're looking at this point, is a recommendation to remove from the budget, from the administration.
Mr. Simonetta, just to be clear, this is the Apple update lease that we would normally have done on a 3-year cycle.
Correct.
So by extending it to a 4th year, you're going to save $400,000
By
next
not
year.
having, yeah, by not having a lease payment for next year, it's $375,000. Is the estimate for not having a lease payment next year. And when we move forward, because the next lease will be up, one of the 3-year ones, we will start the elementary lease on a 4-year cycle, and we'll still be able to stay status quo with the budgeted line.
So how old will the elementary ones be?
They'll be 4 years, except for Shawnee, I believe, will be 5 years.
When?
Because they
At
missed-
the end
At,
of next year?
At the end of next year, yes.
And
All the
Shawnees will be 5 years?
Yes. Shawnee, and Ms. Demers, I think Shawnee's will be 5 years, and the rest of the elementaries will be 3 years. But I guess what
It was a
Shawnee
new
was-
school.
the new
Shawnee
school,
Elementary
and
School, so they had to,
No, I know, I understand that, I just wanted to get from like the, yeah, I understand that.
Mike, after the 3 years, when we offered people to purchase their computers, what was the dollar amount on that? Do you recall? I know we had a dollar
varied
amount.
anywhere from, well, there were two separate, if I remember this past year, there were two separate numbers. It was about 225 plus another 150. So, close to $400,000, I think, with the sale.
Yeah.
And we estimated that we might lose about 75,000 off of that, maybe more on the sale. But again, no offense to anybody, but it's Macs, and they do hold their value a lot better than PC, so we're hoping we don't get hit too bad. We still think they'll be worth purchasing at the reduced rate.
But the reduced rate used to be somewhere, it was $250 to $400, depending the age of the.
400 was the number, 400 or 500.
Well,
And I
it's
think we
three
estimated
for-
that it would be about $100 less one more year.
Yeah, the 5-year ones were, I was told before our technical department changed that that if I purchased mine because it's 5 years old, it would be $250 to $300. Is that correct because of being 5 years old?
It's probably accurate for yours. I'm
Yeah,
not sure
I
which
mean-
one you have.
they would put
What?
market value.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I-
basically, it's set by whatever Mac or Apple looks at the current value.
Yeah.
And that's what we set the prices
Because
at.
I was told I was set for another computer, because mine was, it is 5 years old now.
Okay.
And, I do look at the stuff, but it's behind
Mhm.
compared to my computer that I have at home and so forth. So I'll talk to you about that. And we'll see. I mean, I might purchase it and still use it for another year or so. Because then after that, after 6 or 7 years, you're in another world. So-
Are we getting a lot of repairs on those computers that we're using for the elementary? Life expectancy with kids using
I will
them?
forward that to
I don't
our tech
know.
department, if you
Are
don't
we
mind.
doing okay there?
I asked Eric recently because he does all of our repairs.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked if he noticed that there was more from than the other ones that were 3 years old, and he said it wasn't significant. So,
Okay.
not significant.
That they hold up very well.
Mr. Cook, while you're sitting there, I'm going to throw something at you. You love this, don't you? The carts we purchased many, many years ago at the high school through the state programs, are they still rolling through the high schools and being used?
Yeah, technology department rolled those into a lease,
Okay,
and then some were re-imaged, some were traded out with MacBook Airs. That were all decisions made in the past. But as Mike stated, which some that stated, they get rolled in
Okay.
as the future progresses. But since you've left, they've changed.
okay, good.
Not the same white CFF parts that were there when.
Thank you.
Can we back up a minute, and you were talking about contracted services. So that in specific terms is, you said something about kids' piece. So what is the plan? I was wondering where you went. Then he
I
disappeared.
think it was Kids Piece, was one of the main ones. I have the.
So what would we be doing with, kids' piece is one that comes to mind because that's obviously something that they use quite heavily at the high school. What would we be doing in place of that?
Do you remember? It was Kids Piece, Pearson. Kids Piece and Pearson was the two main contracted areas that we were going to save do differently. And maybe if,
When you say do differently, what do you mean by that? Because I know the IU provides services in psychology.
I'm good, if I can defer
Simply
to.
put, community in schools is going to do what Kids Piece is doing cheaper.
Thank you.
$50,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, a question on the back to the Apple lease.
Yes.
You know, Apple was one of the first companies to really recognize the importance of being a partner with education. Have they been approached, and I mean, what are we doing to see that if they were appraised of our situation, could they do anything for us?
They have been approached, and I will say that they've been very helpful. They've been trying to come up with different ways to say, well, you can still do it. When we first started, we were just going to renew the 3 years. And then we said, well, the budget situation, they said, well, we can still do it, but pay it over 4 years, start on the 4-year cycle. So they came back with those numbers. And actually, I was planning on hearing from our representative today, because they've also said, we can maybe do something, do the 4-year and get them this year, but not pay it for a year. And I said, well, that's fine, but before we do that, what's the difference in cost? And, so if we don't pay for a year, that's great, but then how much more is that going to cost us for that lease versus what we would lose for the revenue? And I don't
Sure.
have those numbers yet.
Okay.
So at this point, we would like to look at not having a lease payment, and we are working with Apple, and they have been very, aggressive isn't the right word, but they've been working with us every step of the way and trying to come up with ways to do it and get new computers in for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I go back to one thing?
Sure.
We passed over it. The FED, or AFED, however some pronounce it, 1/2 pay. Are we going to lose any club advisors or anybody because we're cutting that in half?
Well, that's going to be determined, and that's going to be determined with the administration and the building principals. There will be, obviously, there'll be some advisors, be some programs that will be reduced, but that'll be up to the building principal.
Okay, and maybe if it's possible, because a lot of these are at the high school, maybe it's possible, instead of giving them extra, because they're cutting it in half, it's possible, and I say this to the high school principals that are here, that it's possible, instead of signing them a duty, that they could work on, in some cases, work on their club's activities. In other words, they're gonna get paid half as much, but instead of being a cafeteria aide, they're gonna be allowed to work on, say, FBLA or their chess club or whatever.
Now, with the contractual obligations,
Yeah.
I don't think it's accurate to say they're going to be paid half as much, because it's set in the contract,
Yes.
so it's either you get paid for it or you don't.
Okay, but you're saying here, FA.
And we're cutting half of the stipends,
Yes,
but not half of a stipend. In other words, if there's 5 programs in a building,
Right.
you're gonna have 2.5. Or I'm sorry, let's do easy math. If there's 6 programs in a building, that building's only gonna have 3.
Okay, so in other words, you're just gonna eliminate programs then?
Right.
Eliminate some of the clubs and programs, yeah. of the
Okay, and
extra
then those
pay.
teachers are gonna have to decide if they wanna do it voluntarily, possibly, and keep it going, or not do it at all.
Sure.
Is,
Okay, so they're gonna get paid, the ones that are left will get paid full, whatever whatever it was, and the others are just gonna be eliminated.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
every contract, so.
That's very tough, because some of the programs are good that may be eliminated, and that's a shame. But we're faced with a financial, problem that needs to be, one way or another, it needs to be corrected. So, now I understand.
I mean, we've been through this,
Yeah, no,
every year, and it's, what's the least impact,
right.
in the classroom?
Yeah, so the principals will make that decision though, and then probably the superintendent will make the final decision.
Well, the administration
It
will
will be
work together.
collaborative, but I
It-
think,
well-
I think what we are looking at is, a lot of these are helpful for students to get into college.
Right, yes, that's what I'm
So at the high school
saying,
level,
yes.
we're going to really concentrate our efforts on how can we ensure that we have certain provisions in place so that our students on their transcripts will have those experiences.
Okay.
So we will work, in a concerted effort to make sure that we do our diligence in regards to that.
So in-
Conversely, what we have in our elementary schools and maybe in our middle school may not be as many programs as a
Right.
result of what we will need to do. So all of our principals will be part of that conversation. We will look at what do we feel that our graduates should be able to participate in, and how can we achieve that? So that would be the conversation.
So we will eliminate the pie club.
It hasn't been decided what
I mean,
program, but we will let you know.
I mean, certainly, I don't know if that looks I think it's a great idea that you get a couple hundred students after school to taste a new pie every month. That it's, there is actually a national pie of the month club, that they actually mail you a different pie every month. I saw that in one of the TV commercials. You could sign up for a pie of the month club. And this is what they were doing, but I mean, I don't think that will help you get into college.
Our goal is going to be academic rigor,
Yeah.
relevance, and making sure that we address the needs. of
And
our
they do that
students.
after school. Maybe there's nobody getting paid for it, so that might continue. I went once. I thought it was, unique.
I was just going to ask you if, inclusive of EdFed, is that, like the music program, is that considered the EdFed or no? That's separate?
That's separate. I believe.
Okay, the band is separate?
It's be extra pay for extra duty.
I know that's what it means,
Yes.
but I didn't know if the band was considered extra pay for extra duty. You don't think so?
I don't,
I don't believe it is. part of
No,
that.
it is
don't.
not.
I don't think
It is not.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're down to municipal account reductions?
Yeah,
Or miscellaneous?
I'm just making my
Miscellaneous.
notes. Okay, that's just going through, if you recall, last year, we put over $5 million out of the accounts from 300 to 800 series. Wasn't much to go. We did what we could on the first draft budget, and we took about $200,000 out of other areas after some long discussions. I will tell you that 40,000 of it is directly resulting from operations reduction from the 811 building. About a $40,000 line item for gas, water, electric, in 811. But still going through, we don't need that money in that, so that was 40,000.
Good.
Then under other revenue services to help balance the budget, we are increase our revenues by the sale of 811, about 142,000. Since the first draft of the budget, we got our state aid numbers, and I mentioned last meeting that our state aid did increase about $400,000. And the money that we were informed that we were going to receive from CIT, we'd like to take that revenue as well and put that into balancing the budget. So at that point, we still were found ourselves with a $500,000 deficit. And what we are also requesting in this first scenario is the 4.2 million deficit included $500,000 from surplus appropriation. We're asking for another $500,000 from surplus for those areas, and we have that assigned surplus to get us to 2.1. Now, just a quick discussion about the surplus. This current year, we appropriated 1.5 million. Now, we lost the revenue, the tax revenue from Regalsville. And one of my slides previously was almost $3 million of revenue that we lost this year. We're looking to balance it at 2.1 and bringing our surplus appropriation of $1 million, which is still less than this year, but not nearly making up for the revenue loss that we have. So that's our scenario for balancing at 2.1.
And what does that put our assigned surplus at then, if we would go that
11.5
direction?
million. At the end of the audit, we were at 12.5. With the original 500 that we were going to appropriate, that would have brought it down to 12. And I have a slide that'll show you the other surplus as well. Now we're looking at, it'll be at 11.5.
Thank you, Mike.
Can we interject on the staff from the time that we did the budget?
Sure. The other item on the surplus was, if you recall, after the budget was set, the 12-13 budget in July, we made some additional cuts after the budget. So the surplus that we left 11-12 with, and you'll see those numbers, is going to increase by those cuts that we made. So I don't have the exact numbers, but it's almost like we built up that surplus. This is a good opportunity to take what we built up there with those cuts. And then the purpose was to reduce our deficit in future budgets, and we'll take advantage of that. 1.7%.
May I first ask a question? Of course, there's two sides to balancing the budget, as we've learned with the audits of the last 2 years. What about the revenue side? The revenue side's been light from our projections, as I recall, the last 2 years.
On the future slide, you'll see on the revenues that with a 2.1% tax increase.
I'll wait.
That's all right. I'll say now, because I'm going to forget later. No. With a 2.1% tax increase, we generated probably 1.6 million, 1.7 million. You'll see in the local increase, it's only going to be about $400,000, because it's the effect of a more real number on the collections rate. So
It was 97%.
98, I think,
almost
yeah.
99%.
Yeah.
So you're gonna show where you're adjusting?
Well, yeah, I did that on the original revenue projection. I'm only looking at 96% collections rate.
And does that 96% reflect actual from this past year?
From the audit, yes.
Thank you.
1.7%. We would need an additional $325,000. Get that, we would be looking at 2 additional professional staff and 4 support staff. Now, one thing when we talk about the support staff, obviously that's in the professional staff, we know that's in the classroom, the support staff, or whether it's paras or maintenance, custodial. And again, it is yet to be determined, but we're looking at the numbers that we're going to need to get there. When we start reducing staff, depending on the severity, the cleaning of the buildings, will be affected, quite honestly. Now, it's not that it won't be clean, but, people have gone and talked about going on an alternate schedule for night cleaning, hitting a classroom every other night, if we reduce the staff to a point that they can't handle it, given our square footage. One thing in the custodial area, we are currently at the level of the study from that Hasbro did a few years back, the numbers, because we reduced the last couple of years in that area. So again, it has not been determined where we're going, but there are some of the things we have to consider when as we're reducing, to different levels. And for 0%, in addition to the 325, we would need another 1.1 million. There we would be looking at, and the professional staff of 13 additional, and we're talking, this will affect scheduling at the high school. This will affect possibly the instrumental music program at the elementary school. And middle school sports was on the 0% scenario last year. And that's there again, to get to 0%.
We wouldn't need any support staff or any others, just.
Again, this is a discussion,
Yeah,
projection.
I'm
As
just.
we're getting through to the final document in May,
Yes,
we'll figure out exactly where we're gonna need to go, depending on what scenario the board has us set up for, whether it's 0, 2.1, 1.7, 1.5, wherever we're at, this will all be.
but if we went to 0, it looks like you have 13 and 2, that's 15 and 12. So you're looking at 27 professional staff if you go to a 0%.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, but again, this is only a discussion. This is in anything that's, cutting rock yet.
But these are the areas where the administration is recommending that the cuts be made to match these scenarios.
Yeah, to match the 2.1, the 1.7, or the 0.
Right.
Okay.
I think it's important that we are not recommending a 0%, as it will be an alteration and curtailment of our programs.
Mhm.
We will have an elimination of the instrumental music program. We will have an elimination of our middle school sports program. And we will have an elimination of the current schedule at the high school. We will not be able to staff our high school with this proposal. So it's important to note there is an alteration, as Pennsylvania Department of Ed labels it, it's an alteration and curtailment of programs. So it's important that everyone realizes this is severe.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else this weekend, but Saturday I got one package. And it was about this thick. It had over 50 cards in it supporting the instrumental musical thing. Most of them had written in there, this includes elementary schools. So instead of getting 50 cards separately, somebody figured out that if I collect them all, it costs $2 to mail 50 versus 45 cents a piece. So I went through them, and some of them obviously were not from Easton. I got some from Penargil, I got some from the Poconos, maybe these were people that were in it, and so forth, but a lot of them were not from Easton. But I did look at all the names and so forth.
I think it's important to note when you look at the 2.1, the 1.7, there are definitely it's a reallocation of staff. Some will be done through attrition and some will not. We've tried to rethink our technology lease. Obviously, what we have in place is ideal. We're trying to maintain the fidelity of the program, and that's why we're looking at a 4-year, because we do feel our technology is important. And those two scenarios do not have any alteration or curtailment of programs. The last, the 0, does. Yes.
Dr. McGinley, you laid out one way to get to 0%.
That's correct.
But there must be other ways, correct?
Absolutely.
There are, what our goal is to have interventionists K to 12. And in order to have the interventionist from a K to 12 perspective, that's what we're trying to maintain. And in order to do that, this is the path that we needed to follow.
Right, but it's not the only. There must be a Plan B and a Plan C. So if the board, just hypothetical,
Yes.
if the board were to come back and say 0% budget increase, but preserve middle school sports and instrumental, there must be a way that that could be accomplished. Agreed?
I will tell you, we have been working since last summer, and we have whiteboarded every single scenario. What we have come up with in order to maintain the fidelity of our program, we have not seen that other than what you have before you.
Do each of these scenarios take into account an idea of delivering informational content at the high school level in groups of 50 to 100? More like a college-based system? Have you included that in your scenarios?
No.
Could you?
Mr. Cook, I'll defer to you.
No.
I mean, we've had this conversation, but
As the high school principal, that would never be my recommendation to provide instruction in that sort of environment. So if that's the question you're asking, my response is no. We would not provide instruction to students in 50 or 100 people in a lecture hall. That's not the type of instruction, and that's not the, the path, that we're headed at this point in time. So the answer to your question would be no.
I understand that wouldn't be your recommendation. My question is, can it be looked at as a scenario? Because in difficult times, we have to be open to doing things differently.
And I think it's important to note, that was brought up, we did discuss it. I think the most important thing is looking at differentiating our instruction to make sure that we meet the needs of our students. Developmentally, when you have students of that magnitude in a class and it's a lecture style, we're really trying to get away from lecture style instruction. We're trying to have a mode that it's more hands-on, that it's engaging, and that students are involved in their instruction. I mean, that really is what we are trying to project and move toward. So if we have that type of scenario, could you do it? I mean, it's not that you can't do it. Is that what's best for students and the instruction?
Well, the point is that sometimes you have to do things temporarily to get you to a better place financially. And so I think that should be considered.
I think you have to look at the academics and the fidelity of the academics before the financial. The financial is a component of it, but the academic has to be the first part. That has to be the priority. And we have students that have different needs. We've been looking at data. We've been looking at the trends longitudinally, and it would not be my recommendation to do that for our students, as I don't think it would be the best for them academically, developmentally or academically. If you had students that you were taking students from a regional high school and you were going to do one part lecture and then the next day would be hands-on and they would be broken up, but to have every day as a class size of that magnitude, I do not think it would be effective.
I'm not suggesting all subjects. I'm saying take a subject that's content-driven, say history.
Right.
Can you deliver an effective history program in groups of 50?
I would say no.
No, I don't think so.
I believe students should be engaged. I think it should be a very constructivist approach, that it is not a lecture-type environment. I feel that that is conducive to an educational process. So conversely, I would not agree developmentally that that is what is best for a high school student.
Dr. McGinley, I just wanted to tell you, I had a lecture group in Northampton. It was 50 students. And they told me the year before that I was going to have that many because there was only one class offered in entrepreneurship. And I told them that if you do that, you're going to have to give me C+ students or above, because I wouldn't be able to handle those students that needed help. they did not give me C+ students or above. They basically, whoever signed up for the course, they put in there. I was not able, with 50 kids, to help those that were falling behind. Even though I stayed after school a number of times, you know, this kid couldn't stay, or these two could stay, but these three couldn't. So it was impossible to lecture even to 50 kids and get them to par. I personally didn't fail anybody in the class who really tried, because if they were trying, you know, and with that number of kids, I felt they should pass. And the only ones I failed were those that were doing nothing. But in a high school, to get into 50 or more than that, Doctor, it would be very, very difficult.
I think it's also,
And to have a quality of learning.
I think it's also important to note, I mean, we're trying to offer different pathways for our students. And one of the pathways is dual enrollment. So we have students that are enrolled in college classes that would have an enrollment such as what you are suggesting. But it's not for all students. So I think that's the point that I'm trying to make.
I understand that. Let's say you took college-bound students and did that with a select group. Would that not help alleviate staffing concerns?
I don't think that the staffing that you would think that you would achieve by doing that with the group of students is as large as you might think. And then you have to have the environment that is conducive to that. And it's usually a staggered. It would be like your auditorium. So that would be one setting in our high school. But we don't have various settings like that you do in a college environment. So you have to think about the environment as well.
I'm simply encouraging that we use creativity in trying to achieve the best solution for our students.
And I think we would agree with that. We have been doing that. So, and if there is something that you know, obviously our stakeholders think of, such as yourself, we welcome those. We want to think about those things, and we did have discussion about it. So it's not as if it went on deaf ear. It did not.
With the flexible scheduling, has the dual enrollment increased at community college?
I don't think it did this year, did it?
No, it's about the same, and the reason for that, Mr. Ryder, is the fact that, you know, dual enrollment did really well when the state was subsidizing the
Right.
youngsters who were in the program.
Okay.
The state is no longer doing that, so it kind of handcuffs some of our populations at the high school being almost 40% free and reduced lunch now. With the economic downturn,
Right.
very difficult for families to get up the money to have their student attend even Northampton Community College. It's financially benefits that family to do that, but it's very difficult, you know, with the financial terms. And the state is not assisting us with that program any longer, so it's coming out of the parents' pocket
Right.
altogether. The other thing is at the high school, we also have a very competitive group of students who are, you know, very much in study with advanced placement, and looking at, you know, setting up their resume, as Dr. McGinn mentioned before, to compete with the best kids in the country for opportunities at Ivy League schools. Leaving campus, even with a better scheduling scenario, to go to Northampton College, community college isn't always the best option for those students. AP Physics, A or B, AP Chemistry, AP Biology, at East Area High School, looks better on their transcript with a score of a 4 or 5 than Northampton Community College Intro to Physics.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
So you got two,
Yeah.
you know, two spectrums there. So to answer the question, it hasn't necessarily increased, but it hasn't gone down considering, you know, the number of students or the cost of dual enrollment. But we also have students at Lafayette, Lehigh, in the sales honors program. I'm not sure if we have any students this year, but that is always an option for
Yes.
students.
Yeah, I'm aware of that as
And
well.
this schedule allows for that to happen.
Right.
Dr.
I-
McGinley, I'm addressing this question to you because I already asked Mike before the meeting. He doesn't know the answer. He's going to get me the information. He didn't know off the top of his head walking in, so he's going to get it for me. But I'd like to get the answer today if somebody in the room knows it. I've been here a year and a half, and we've been talking about the future's bleak, right, for the last couple of years, financially, this. It's 2013. When was the last year, if you can remember, that our future wasn't bleak? We were doing okay. Do you know off the top of your head, maybe?
2007.
2000, okay, so before, okay. Now, my question is, do you know, this is the question I proposed to Mike, when was the last time the Easton School District did not raise taxes on the residents? I mean, anybody know that's been here for a long time? I don't know.
What was your question?
The last time the district did not raise taxes on the residents of Easton? Serious question, because I have no idea.
I could tell you, it's been at least 20 years.
No.
That we haven't raised taxes?
No.
Yes.
That 20 years?
No.
I got that information from Natalie Mathias. And she did a
2006?
she did a whole thing on it. It's been 20 years.
I
We
think,
had we had years.
I think it was 2006.
yeah.
That might be, but she had told me when she was covering it that in the last 20 years that there was one time taxes weren't raised.
I'm gonna go with the.
Because it was a big deal at the time. Dennis Stryker proposed, and I believe the board passed, it was 1 year, and I think you're right, it was maybe 2006.
That could
And
be, but
it was a 0% tax increase.
is that right? I know 1 year we had a 75 cents. It was for the month.
All right, well, I like
That-
Mr. First.
Okay, well,
so I'm gonna stay on
you
track.
might
I'll
be
stay with
right.
that one.
You might be right.
I'll stay with that answer. I just want to get back
I
on.
verified the
Mis-
date, but I know under
Yeah.
Dennis
Mr. First, that might be the only time in 20 years that was, that's because Madeline said there was one time in 20 years it wasn't raised. She told me this last year. And, but I will tell you, we did raise it one time, only 75 cents a month, which was $9 for the whole year. And my concern was that we paid for it the next year. I said, let's balance this out a little bit, because the next year following that, we came out with a 4.5% increase to the taxpayers, even taking a couple $1 million out of our reserve, because 75 cents a month, $9 for the whole year, that's really great. But it wasn't gonna work for the following years.
Well, since you,
But
I'm going to follow you in that door for a minute, Dr. Volcano. I'm going to go with you now for a minute. I believe Mr. First, but I'm going to follow you for a minute.
I believe him too, because she.
So
told
let's
me-
just say in 19 years we raised taxes, with 1 year we didn't.
Right, I would agree with that.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's.
I mean, not saying, does it sound like we should be raising taxes for 19 years straight, maybe one off?
Right.
Even if it's 75 cents?
Yeah, 75 cents.
I mean, what
yeah,
I
right.
what I was told by somebody very recently from the district is, we're much lower than, we're raising taxes a lot lower than what other districts in the area are.
In the area, right.
But my point that I brought up before and I'm bringing up now, and I'm not saying I'm going with the 0 or 1.7 or a 2.2. You know, this is a lot I have to digest and look over and make a
we all
decision.
do.
But my question is, 1.7, 2.2, 19 years, it just keeps adding. So if we look at a 2.2 or a 1.7 or whatever, and I'm not saying 0 is the right way to go, because we don't want to hurt children, or hurt them any more than they've been. But when you total all that up, let's say for 19 years, it's not the 1.7 or the 2.2 or the 75 cents that you spoke of however many years ago.
That was actually only 5 years ago.
It's years and years combined that keeps hitting the taxpayer. And I think that, I mean, you know, if 19 years, so since 2007, the economy went about then, 2008, we've been taxing. And even before then, when times were good, we were taxing. So I think we need to start thinking much further ahead and get out of this to where we're going to tax people to death every year. Now, obviously, with the times we're in right now, we're in a hard situation, a tough situation. We're in a hole that's been 20 plus years in the making. You know, I do blame governor with the cuts and different things, but I also blame, you know, some fiscal mismanagement for the last 20, 25 years, as I look around and I see different things at different meetings. But you know, when we look at this and we just have to keep focusing, I mean, it's been years and years and years. One thing we agreed on, kind of agree on, there's only 1 year that people remember not having a tax increase.
That's correct.
I mean, that's not good. It's not good for the people. We are in charge of educating the children and keeping them safe. But we have to remember, we only have them so many months out of the year, so many hours out of the day. They still have to go home, and we still have to make sure the families are financially not being overtaxed, so where they can provide for the children. So we just, I didn't know it was only one time.
It's definitely
Recently, our projections, 5 years ago when we bought the program to do our projections to where we were going in the future, we showed that we would be in a shortfall at this time, and that's where we are. So it really has nothing to do with the state government, with the federal government. We would have been in a shortfall regardless. And pretty much where we're at is what we projected.
So let me ask you, Ms. Ellison, I don't know if you were here at the time. Obviously, I'm thinking you were.
No, she was.
You were, because when a software projects that at such and such time you're going to be there, did that not raise a red flag for anybody?
Oh, it
Say we need to work
absolutely
now?
did. And I would say this, that was some of the concerns that we had 5 years ago, was that we weren't attacking it at a fast enough, aggressive rate. I guess it was 4 years ago now, we had a significant cut in our staffing to accommodate for that. But 5 years ago, we didn't. We were then looking at it and saying, okay, where do we go with this? But it was still going to be that way, regardless. And we should have done stuff sooner. And now we're faced with what we exactly thought we would be faced with. This is exactly where we're at. And, even though the teachers gave up something, 2 years ago and gave a significant amount out, we still knew that was not going to get us out of the hole, and it didn't. And it won't.
Right.
We're in this hole, and we need to dig ourselves out. I mean, I would project, if I'm looking at that 0%, and I agree with Dr. Moskaitis, I think that there are some creative ways that you can look at doing things differently. I think that we need to start thinking about, when we're talking about cutting back on computers and everything, we need to start thinking more about computer-based learning. Because perhaps some of these courses that we teach with a teacher in front of the classroom, we could do as a computer-based learning endeavor. And these are the things, and I look at this and I say, all middle school programs cut. Why wouldn't we be more creative and say, you know what, maybe we need to get rid of some of the programs that the community does, like in the high school. Perhaps we just do JV and varsity baseball and don't do the freshman baseball. They have baseball programs in the community for that age bracket that does that same exact thing. So those, and keep some of those programs at the middle school that we've had traditionally, but maybe not all of them. We didn't always have cross-country at the middle school. Maybe we need to start looking back and saying, okay, where have we come from over the last 6 years, 7 years? And maybe we need to go back to that point. We still offer some things, but not all of them. But to say this is too simplistic for me, and it really bothers me very much when I see this, because we're not looking at this in a critical way and saying, how can we do things differently, but do them in a cheaper way?
But and also, and where I'm going,
more
and you're kind of
cost-effective.
where I'm at. We have to change the culture of the district. We can't just keep. We're negative. Let's cut. Next year we're negative. Let's cut. Let's cut something else. That's not
No, we
gonna.
can't
That's
keep
not gonna
doing
work.
that. Right.
It seems like all we want to do is mop up the water when we need to turn off the faucet.
Right, I agree with you, but that's why I'm saying doing things differently, not necessarily just cutting, but doing
Doing
the
them
same
looking at doing them
kind of
differently, not for
education
now, but for down the
in a
road.
creative way, but doing computer-based. That wouldn't be as expensive, and there are some great programs that we have right now that could be computer-based. We're not, I just think that this, I understand that this is just supposed to be a synopsis tonight, so I'm not being highly critical, but this is very simplistic to me.
I mean, and I'm with you, and I'm sorry, I'll let you get in. But I mean, and I agree with you there, because all I see here is cuts, and maybe, alternating when we clean the schools. and that's supposed to balance the budget this year. But next year, you know, and then what if something happens the following year? So, again, we're mopping up the water instead of just turning it
Well,
off.
my hope would be that we would be getting into these things, that we could enable our schools to do things differently, like perhaps purchase more computers so that they could do more. It would be expensive initially to purchase more computers, but wouldn't it be cheaper in the long run that we weren't having to pay for the personnel to be there and the benefits that go with that personnel? I mean, there's a lot of creative ways, but we need to build that capacity so that we wouldn't have to do the cuts year after year after year.
But I'd like to see more of a plan than just.
But that's what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
right, than
You
just
need,
cut.
you need to have a plan. You can't
'Cause
just.
I can't vote for a 1-7-2-2. You know, it's hard to vote by looking at this. All right, we're gonna cut, knowing that I don't see a plan for next year.
But that's exactly right.
So I don't see a plan for the following year. I don't see a plan for, you know, long after I'm gone. So, I mean, to sell me on it, make me see that there's a light somewhere at the end, that we're changing the way we do things.
That's-
And we're looking at the long term.
That's part of the problem that I've had with this over the last 5 years that I've been involved with it. Every year we get to April and we get, or March, and we get our preliminary, budget, and, we see the deficit every month when we come in here. We see it on our whiteboard in the boardroom. But we don't talk about what's going to be cut. But then in March, all of a sudden, it's whoom, wham. And that's where you're feeling right now. You're feeling like there's no plan, and all of a sudden, this is in our face in March.
It's just another
And
quick fix.
every year this happens, but to have a plan ongoing through the year that we're working toward.
Yeah, I'd just like to say two things. Since I've been on the board, I've said constantly that we have to give our students the best education that our taxpayers could afford. Sure, we could give everybody a computer, everybody, new desktop computers that they could work on and so forth, but that we're going to bankrupt the taxpayers. So we have to give our students the best education the taxpayers could afford. And one of the things, and Mike got stuck with this, this wasn't his doing, is that in 07 and 08, I sat here and I voted against when they hired something like 225 teachers in those 2 school years, because they wanted to fill every single hole that everybody had a complaint with. Now, somebody said, oh, we didn't have enough security guards, so they went out and hired security. We don't have enough resource teachers, so they went and hired this. We don't have enough on-staff special ed teachers, so they hired this. Everything that the public brought up, we were hiring, and we sort of plugged every hole. No, but my problem is that in plugging every hole, I knew the dam would break. Okay, and it has broken the last 3 years with the layoffs that we've had in the number of teachers. And bringing in 225 teachers over 07 and 08, I know it was not sustainable. And I voted against it.
Well, we added on to reduce. That's what we
Right.
basically did. We added on to,
Right.
in the next year, reduce.
Right.
And now we're sitting in where we talked about.
Right.
The 5-year projection showed that.
Right.
Right where we're at
Absolutely,
right
you're
now.
correct.
It doesn't matter what the governor does or what the president does.
No.
We're gonna be in this hole.
We were gonna be in this hole. And we, before Mike, was only been here 2 years, right? Yeah, almost 2 years. Okay, we had a business administrator that just didn't plan anything. He just went ahead, and every year he presented us a budget with no plans, like Frank is saying. He's 100% right. Nothing to show what we could be at or what we should be doing to lower a deficit.
But I don't think that we're here at this point now to criticize what's happening.
No,
What was done in the past was done with foresight.
Right.
What they thought would happen. So
Right.
I don't think, but certainly we need to look at where we are and we need to start
Right.
making a plan for the future.
No, I agree.
I have no question.
Comment?
What I'd like to do is just address what Mr. Pinnabone and Mrs. Ellison have spoken about. Last year, I advocated for a 0% tax increase. That was intentional, and it was intentional because what I see in this district is the same pattern of behavior and the same pattern of planning, but it's pseudo-planning. And you need to do something and take a stand before things will change. So you're right, if 19 out of 20 years of tax increases
Definitely
have
has.
gotten us to where we are now, I would argue that they've been pretty ineffectual. The second part is, I would be critical of the 0% as posed, because it's the only item that invoked music and sports in its cuts. That's very draconian, and so what the media will pick up is if you vote for 0 or propose 0, we're doing harm to children. That's why I say there are different ways to accomplish that goal. And I would like to hear them. I would like to debate them. And then we can achieve something that is informed and reasonable. We talk about class size quite often. What's the optimum ratio of teacher to student for learning? What would you say? I'd say one-on-one would be very good. Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? Do we not love our children? We don't do it because we don't have the tax dollars to do that. And so sometimes you have to take temporarily difficult measures so that you can right the ship and get yourself back on a path where you can actually do things that we all want to do, which is to add programs. What year was the current teacher's contract approved? Can anyone tell me that among the year?
2007.
The first year you were on, Mrs. Ellison, remember, the first year you were on it, they presented it to you the first night.
Yeah.
That would have been '07? Oh, no, not
December
'07.
2007.
Yeah,
So
December of 2007.
I would submit to you that you have kind of a perfect economic storm. You have a very expensive contract at the same time as the economy went downhill. And we're living with that today. And for another year, 2 years,
Two.
unless some reality changes. I use the phrase Groundhog Day because it's not only what we're into, but it's the process of how we're getting there. And creativity is needed at all levels.
But if creativity is a continual extension of cutting, then it's minus 27. Last year it was minus 40. The year before it was minus 40 again, maybe more. So as we continue to break this down, we continue to cut staff, which eventually will eliminate programs, which eventually will create a real challenge for our kids in the learning component. We already cut full-day kindergarten. I still can't believe we did that. Drives me crazy. I wish we could find nickels and dimes to support that. But you have kids at risk, and we can't afford and want to pay the money to put kids who are at risk in a full-day kindergarten. But you know what? 40 this year, 27. Next year we're at 6.2 million, so we start cutting there. Oh, well, we'll make that maybe 35. And yes, we will have one for 50. That's very possible, which is, to me, great if you're in college and you take a lecture at 7:30 in the morning, and you better participate. You better be awake because you're going to flunk out if you don't. But we're losing our kids. We're not supporting them by making cuts. Yes, I understand we have a contract that we use the term we can't sustain it. We all know that. The public knows it. Everybody involved knows it. But I don't see any change in that until the contract is done. So we just continue to cut. Can't see it. One of the things we did last year, which, gee, rocket science. If I'm a high school principal and somebody says, Bill, you have a $400,000 budget this year. Spend your money wisely. Okay, thank you. And the next year somebody comes to me and says, Bill, you have $360,000 this year. Spend it wisely. Probably going to look to cut some areas. Now, a little bit here, a little bit there, over there. Last year we looked at athletics and we said, we're going to cut one of the programs, the totality of it. Instead of going back to the drawing board and saying, after obviously we discussed it in a public forum, we thought the athletic director could go back and look at the totality of the athletic department, and maybe we could reduce it $75,000, and we did that. I know Mike sat with Jimmy last year, and we did that. Maybe raise ticket prices a little bit, look at maybe an assistant coach, something along the lines. Maybe not having as many coaches. But yes, there's ways to look at things creatively. I don't disagree with people. But the reality of it is, don't cut teachers. I just can't sit here as an educator and continue to look at 40, 27, and God knows at 6.2 what we're going to do next year. I can't. It's not the way education should be run. It's not effective education for our kids. And that's why we're here. That's why I took this crazy job. Because you're educating kids. And it's still the most important thing we do on a daily basis. I don't have a magic wand. I broke that.
Listen, I thank the administrators for the time they put in to put this together. When I voted last year, I said when I voted at 2.1, that I'm voting at 2.1 to give us this little cushion, that we're gonna be looking to work for the future. What we really, I see that we work to do is just make more cuts a year later. We're supposed to vote on this next week, right? On a preliminary budget?
On the preliminary, which is basically the budget with the tax impact.
Right. There's no way I could vote on a preliminary budget just with this. I have to start asking for plans for the future. What does this district plan on doing? And I would encourage all of my fellow board members to not vote on the preliminary budget until we start putting things together for the future. I'm not saying you're gonna change anything in here for the next, in time, you know, for this, what we gotta vote on this year. But we still are not seeing anything for the future. And all I see now is no matter what we vote, 0, 1.7, 2.1, 2.2, next year at this time, we're gonna be in the same place, having the same discussion. I thought after last year, we were gonna start seeing plans on how we were going to stop doing it business as usual. And I haven't seen those plans. I just see more of, well, we'll just cut, raise taxes, take money out of the reserves, and that'll get us to next year. Here comes next year, we do it again. I really need to see the direction that we plan on this district going in. And I haven't seen that yet since I've been here in a year and a half. So, I mean, I'd say we don't vote on the preliminary budget, and we gotta see a plan, my opinion. The rest, everybody can do what they want. There's no way I can vote. I mean, I'm not just gonna keep voting to raise taxes and cutting staff, and nobody has a plan for next year, the year after, the year after that. It's just, it's irresponsible. It's been happening for too long, and it's time to stop.
I'd just like to say, Frank, I agree with you, but in reality, to get a plan, put a plan together, a 1, 2, or 3 year plan, and then get a budget through now.
You're absolutely right. It's not gonna happen. It's not enough time.
It's not feasible,
But
right?
show me the groundwork.
Right.
Show me it's being done. We're looking at the future.
And we've discussed this a number of times, to have a retreat where we would spend a full day someplace other than here, so we don't get bothered. A retreat on planning, making those plans ahead of time on, and talking about contracts, things that we could talk about in private, and staffing, and all those things that would affect the budget. And there are, and sometimes they work very well. The community college does it, they go away someplace, and they have a retreat, and they're basically talking about, you know, staffing, they're talking about contracts, and all those things that would affect the budget. I mean, 80% of this budget or better is fixed, am I right, Mike? 80 to 85%, I don't know, but I'm in that ballpark. It's
88%
totally,
of this.
what?
88 for this
88,
budget.
okay, it's totally fixed, and there's nothing we could do about it. We have the 12% that we could do something about, and that's, you know, that's what we have to look at. And we're not gonna do it, Frank, it's excellent what you're saying, and Dr. Moskaitis is saying, and Mrs. Ellison, and Mr. Ryder, but we gotta pass a budget this year, and doing a 1 to 3 year plan is not, it's something that after we pass this budget, we should start working on that immediately.
Why wasn't it started 7 years ago? How long have you been on the board, Dr. Volcano?
I've been on the board 12 years, and every year I brought this up and haven't got any, you know.
Well, here, I don't wanna go on a retreat. I don't need a retreat. Here's what I want. I want the people who work in the district
Everything else.
to just tell us their vision. Tell us where they wanna see the district a year from now, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Sit, talk, how can we make that happen? They know better than we would, so a retreat for me
Well,
would be a vacation.
the treat could be, it's not, it's
I know what you're
one
talking
day
about.
of a lot of work.
Right.
And it's just that we go to another place that just
Right.
puts our mind in a different setting, that's all. It's
What
not,
I would
nothing,
like to see
it,
is
there's
the
no,
administrators, all
nothing
teachers,
fancy.
Everybody who, you know, who are in this district, to talk about their vision for the district, right? To see where we can go. How many times have we heard since I've been here, we do this? Well, why do we do this? I don't know, we've been doing it all, ever since I've been here.
You're correct.
Well, just because we've always done it doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. So, and I'm not saying I need to see a plan now, but I need to see some footwork. I mean, that's what I said last year, and I haven't seen anything. We've talked, nothing comes out of it. And now here I am again, cut this, raise taxes here. So, you're right, we're not gonna get it done by this budget.
No,
But if it would've been done 7 years ago, we might be on that path now.
And,
So why keep putting off, well, we'll do it after this budget? We said that after last year's budget. Now we're saying, let's do it again. So I'd just like to see the groundwork of changing the culture of this district before you keep asking me to raise taxes and cut staff.
Well, I will tell you, and Tim, I think, will back me up. Tim and I have said this, and we have voted against a number of budgets because of the fact that there was not any planning done ahead of time for the future.
But you
Am I
voted,
correct?
against it.
And
I'll
don't
agree
wanna, I
because
don't
I
wanna
wasn't
speak
there.
for you, but you and I have voted against a number of budgets because of the lack of what they're saying.
No, not for the lack of what we're saying.
But-
My criteria is our budget increase should never be greater than the inflation, consumer price index, whatever
Right.
marker you want to
Yeah,
use.
okay.
Now, I voted against budgets that were greater than inflation, and voted
I
for
have to.
budgets that were at or below inflation. I don't think we should grow our government bigger than that. That's when I voted against.
Okay, and we
And-
voted together, and most of the time on that.
But looking back 7 years ago, no one could foresee what today is.
No.
They couldn't see the housing market where it is today, where the economy where it is today, where our teachers' contract is today. So going back 7 years and saying we should have been planning, all the planning in the world would never have envisioned what we have today. We have to deal with the facts that we have today.
No, I disagree.
And we can only project as far as we can with the current contracts. Teacher's contract lasts another 2 more years after this.
But so can
That's
you-
that's how far we can plan.
Can you tell me, Mr. Riley, since you've been here, can you honestly tell me that financially, the district has been conservative with our funds? Can you honestly tell me that?
When we don't, personally, in my opinion, when we haven't raised our rates above the rate of inflation, I think we've been on the mark or good.
Yes, conservatively.
But when we had 10% raises, I disagreed with it and voted against it.
Ms. Ellison, I see you shaking your head. Can you comment? You were here.
Oh, I don't think that the district has been conservative in their expenditures over the last many years that I've been involved in the district. I mean, there are things that we've spent money on that, you know, have some kind of value, but did they really? But we didn't look at where we were going to be now 10 years ago. So I will definitely say there are things that we've spent money on in the district over the last 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years that had we known that we were going to be where we are now, we wouldn't have spent money there. No, I don't think that the district's been smart in many of the things that but hindsight's 20/20. You know, I mean, we could all say that. You look back and sure.
But I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but when you tell me 5 years ago, you had software that predicted we'd be in this position and nobody did anything to stop it. So, that's what, you know, that's something that gets me. I wasn't here, but software says in 2013, you're gonna be screwed. And nobody said, wait a minute, we have to adjust something, we have to do something?
I think that what happens is the board is expecting that the administration's going to come to the table with what their recommendations are, and each year it's come down to the 11th hour, and we've had major cuts in staffing or whatever, and that's been what they presented to the board, and the board either voted or didn't vote it. And ultimately, it did get voted on and passed. But that's what has happened in the past.
So we should start asking now for a plan.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with
How do you
you.
obtain a plan? How do you obtain a plan? When you go a couple pages more and look at your contracted services. Your contracted services lock you in. And if you go down the page further, which probably we should, since we're dealing with budget, and I'm retired and I don't care what time I get home, the reality of it is when we look at salary increases, if you just look at that, we haven't looked at a central administration. We haven't looked at a central administration increase for 2 years.
Next one.
Building
Mr.
administration,
Ryder.
Act 93, right? Keep
Hang
going,
on for a
keep
second.
going. Let's go through this. Because the reality of it is,
Let-
we want to look down the road, but the road is contractual.
But, and I agree with you, and that's why I said, not saying it's gonna change this year, but we keep doing what we're doing, 2 years down the road from now, there are no contractual obligations, but there was no plan put in place. So now we're gonna scramble to put a plan together, as Ms. Ellison said, we're gonna be at the 12th hour again, 11th hour again. So why can't we start it now? I know no plan that you put together now is gonna affect, you know, right now because we have contractual obligations. But what I'm saying is, start it now. Why do we always wait till April to do something?
Mr.
And
Chairman.
we still aren't looking at plans?
I'd like to remind Mr. Pittibone that back in July of last year, we cut an additional 18 positions. And what did we say when we did it? We're preparing for next year's budget. So don't tell us that we weren't preparing last year.
You call cutting planning?
It's, what else do you do when you have fixed costs
I'm
and a
talk-
limited
but
supply
you're
of
not-
money?
You see, Mr. Raleigh, you're not hearing me.
I hear you
No, but
all
you're
day
not,
long.
because I'm saying this budget here isn't going, I'm not saying we're gonna change what we're looking at now. But for 7 years, Mr. Riley, your board has not done anything for the future. The board has not done anything for the future. Yes, we made cuts for this year coming. And now maybe in July, we'll make more cuts because of next year. But when do we start looking at other things so every year our planning doesn't consist of cutting for the following year?
We start looking differently when the conditions change. The conditions are locked for the next 2 or 3
You're too
years.
late then. If you
It's
know
not
the
too late.
contract is up, if you know a contractual obligations are up in 2 years, you start preparing now.
But you don't know what they're going to settle
You
for.
don't, and you can't look at contracts now, but there's other things in this district that are not just contractual obligations that can be changed. I said
Give me an
change the
example.
culture. That's why I said we go to the teachers, the administrators. I'm not in the district every day. But I'm sure there's waste in the district somewhere that we can look at changing for the future. Then when the contractual obligations come, we deal with those.
May
But
I-
everybody's just waiting year to year to year.
May
When
I-
do people realize that it's not working?
Frank, I suggest you turn on your microphone so
They can't hear me.
everyone could hear you. But in reality, a lot of what you're asking for is not going to start happening until July 1. There's a major change in the CEO position, in the superintendent position.
Correct.
I would submit that the district has been kind of like being in a bus and driving by only looking at your rearview mirror. It's not a good way to get to the future. But if you look at this slide, I think you would understand, and around any kitchen table, Southside, Forks, Martins Creek, if you looked at this table, you might understand that a single decision had an overwhelming impact on the financial state of this district, and continues to.
Dr. Moskaitis, could you please provide some clarity as to July 1st with the new CEO, as to the statement that the rearview mirror is the view? Could you please provide clarity?
I can provide you clarity, Dr. McGinley. What I hope we have on July 1 is someone who looks forward, not backwards. Looking backwards is to prepare the kind of proposal that we see once again this year. It is not creative. It continues not to be creative. So expecting something to be changed, which is what Mr. Pinnabone is asking for, I don't think it's going to happen.
Dr. Moskaitis, I respectfully disagree with your point of view, and I would please ask that you don't evaluate myself or our administration in a public setting. It's not appropriate, because this administration, along with myself, have worked diligently, and there is creative means in regards to every one of our budgets that we have done. We take it, we're very passionate about what we do. We take it very seriously. When Mr. Pinnabone states that there is no plan, we work every single day. And as Mr. Riley stated, from the day that it was passed last year, the next morning, we were right at task, as we are every single day. So I think the lack of knowledge certainly is not in line with what is occurring. And I can't answer or speak to why you would think that we are not always looking forward. We have done interventions K-12. That was never in our district before. We have done professional development at all different levels. We have looked at where our gaps are in our data analysis. We have looked at what we needed to do to provide professional development for our staff in order to align with what our needs are for our students. We have looked at a comprehensive way for counselors, for special ed. We have rewritten manuals, curriculum guides to align with what the state standards are.
What have you done as far as finances?
We have looked at, I was the one that asked for the board to move forward as a projection to see statistically where we were going to be. I was not here when the contractual agreement was agreed upon, but I saw that we had a huge deficit. And I went to the board and said, what was agreed upon? I'm not here to do this. I'm here to work collectively with everyone to say, we need to resolve it. We're certainly not in a place that any of us wanted when certain contractual obligations were approved. However, you need to move forward, and we have moved forward. So I asked for the software, that we could have a projection so that we could educate everyone. because I really felt that everyone didn't understand the complexity of this. Because it was not sustainable from day one, nor will it ever be. People say, well, in 2 years, if you don't go backwards, it still is not sustainable. So when you say move forward, we see how we have to move forward, and we continue to see that. It's extremely frustrating, but every day we don't take our frustration, we use our efforts to move forward and to think creatively and to look at cyber school as an option, to look at technology and how we can, relate some of the needs for our students. We've looked at partnering with different organizations to bring our resources into our district at a more cost-effective way. When I was director of support program, I brought in dual enrollment. It was a grant. We brought in KTO, a $2.5 million grant for this school year. We have thought creatively, and we continue to think creatively. So I would please ask that you would refrain from that thought, and if we need to, as a group, outline some of the things that we have done, we certainly can provide that. But I ask that you please refrain from that thought. It truly is not indicative of what has occurred or what is occurring.
Well, Dr. McGinley, my thoughts belong to myself. And I will speak to what I see. If you recall, I asked you last year, I believe, regarding the record at the high school on PSSAs. This might have been 2 years ago. And I asked you if you were satisfied with failing 7 years in a row. And you turned to me and said, yes, I am. And you invoked much the same argument. We try hard. We're doing our best. And there's the disconnect. In my world, effort alone is not enough. The taxpayers of this district all work hard. You're expected to work hard.
Absolutely. And with privilege.
After third grade, I stopped being graded for effort and deportment. And I would suggest that we look more carefully at results.
I agree. And that's why we are doing data analysis. And that's why we're not just looking at it, we're looking at it, what it means. What is the trend? Where are the gaps? How can we do better instruction? When we do something that isn't working, why isn't it working? And we're working in teams to analyze that and to make changes. But I think it's important to note when I said that, I stated to you, please do not misconstrue what I said. It was about efforts on moving forward and putting programs and also professional development in place, those efforts. It did not reflect the data in regards to the numbers. No one is ever pleased with a student or students that are not proficient in every area. Our goal every day is to strive for that, because we do believe in our students. And that is the outcome, the desired outcome that we always want and we feel should be established for all students. So it was never stated in my thought, nor in anyone else's thought in our administration, that if a student is not proficient, that's acceptable. That's never acceptable to us. That's why we feel privileged to do what we can do every day to support our students and our staff to be better, not complacent.
Yeah, I'd just like to get this in. We're talking about planning. And first of all, I don't know even if the state allows us to do a plan. I know in the third-class cities, they're told they have to work on 1 year at a time. Okay, that's the law in Pennsylvania on third-class cities. They can't do 2 budgets at one time. Okay, basically that's what we're asking.
No,
but
no,
the
we're not.
Well, no, but
I
let me
brought
get-
it up, so just make sure you're right. I'm not asking you to do 2 budgets at one time.
No,
You
you
don't?
want to do a plan, but the
No,
problem
not a
is,
budget, though.
Mike just answered that, question about planning, and I agree with 100% Mr. Ryder saying, we can't cut teachers and expect to get better results. That's one thing. The other thing is, we're talking about planning on 12%. Because 88% of our
No,
budget
Dr.
is
Volpino,
fixed.
That's not what I'm talking about.
If that's fixed, we're only doing a plan on 12%.
Listen, if we don't catch it on this time, I'm just not gonna throw it anymore. I know this budget we're working on now, a plan isn't gonna change it.
No, right, you're
I understand.
100% right, can't
But-
do it now.
Thank you. We know contractual obligations are up in 2 years, right?
Right.
We agree with that. So I'd like to see plans start getting it kicked around instead of every year cuts. That's what I'm saying. It has nothing to do with this budget that time's up on this one.
No, I understand.
No,
that.
you don't. But it's okay. 'Cause
No,
I'm trying to explain
I'm
it.
telling
Maybe I
you-
didn't say it properly.
Yeah, I told you that I understand that there's nothing we could do with this budget. I told you that earlier.
All right, well, I'll move on from that. Dr. McGinley, I'm not.
Yes, I just wanted to say to you, when you talk about a plan, our district does a school plan, which you have been privy to, and goes to the state, and we do it for every single school, the entire district. This budget emulates what we need to do in order to be in accordance with what our students need.
Let me stop saying we need to get a plan, because we need a better plan. Here's what I'm saying. I don't want a plan, Dr. McGinley, that just says, we're gonna raise taxes 2.1 and we're gonna cut 23 people. To me, that's not a plan. To me, our back's on the wall and that's us swinging to get off the ropes. That's what that is to me. What I would like to see happen, and I'm not saying our people aren't doing it. What I'm saying is, I haven't heard about it. I wanna hear about it. We have a lot of people, educated people working for this district, right?
Absolutely.
People that probably have some great ideas. So why can't we start looking at those ideas, and instead of in April and March looking to cut and raise taxes as a plan, look at other ways down the road that we can start with saving money. I applaud you for bringing that tool in to calculate where we would be in 5 years. But to bring a tool in and seeing that we're gonna be screwed in 5 years and not doing anything about it, that tool's a waste of money. 2 years in a row, we finished over budget. That's unacceptable. Mid-year, if it sees that we're going over budget, our top people need to make sure we get it in line before the year's over. So what I'm saying is, this to me is not a plan. This to me is more of a result of not planning. Financially, I'm not talking about putting educational pieces in play. Because you can put all the educational pieces in play, but if you turn around every year and cut more teachers, what are those educational pieces you're putting in? How are they affecting the kids? Are they working for them if there's nobody to teach it?
Would we all agree that the number one priority is to be fiscally responsible? So when you do any type of contractual obligation, that plan has to be in accordance, that you shouldn't have to cut.
I agree with you.
That's number one. It is essentially going out and buying a home for $100,000, and you save and you work diligently every day, and you get to the point and you say, you know what, we can buy a home for $100,000. You buy that home with a $100,000 home, and you go to the bank and you misappropriate what you actually are earning. Therefore, you cannot make your monthly payments. So what do you do? What do you do? Well, you have a little money saved. That's your fund balance. And you keep on dipping in that savings. And every month, okay, you can offset it. And you're saying to yourself, all right, well, I bought that $100,000 home because that's what I wanted. And that's what I think I deserved. But you could never afford it. When you're in a situation like that, it's unprecedented, unprecedented. You look at any school district, sustainability is number one. So we have been in an unprecedented situation and an unsustainable situation. So the desired outcome is not going to be a neat little tidy package as one would want.
I understand what you're saying. Comparing a person's home to this is apples and oranges, just in my opinion.
You have entered into a contract that is unsustainable.
But that's somebody's personal money, personal home they're dealing with. We're talking about dealing with other people's money and children and other people's money. My issue is, you're right. The contract, if it was known it was unsustainable, should have never passed. But it did. And for us to say, well, it passed, what are you gonna do? Nobody cares.
That's where the plan needed to be in place at that time.
Thank you. But it's not. So why is it so hard for me to say, let's start now?
We are,
But not financially.
and we have. Yes, we
But
have.
when you brought up, and you did some good things, you brought it up, but it all is academics. We got a grant, that's great. But we know we can't budget on a grant, because we don't know, it might get pulled again. So,
But that's
although the
being
academic,
creative.
it is.
That's looking outside
Well, I
the
didn't
box.
say you
What
weren't
other
creative,
things
but
are
I'm
there?
looking more on the money side. You're saying it should have been done 5 years ago. I agree with you. I don't know if you were here. I wasn't here. But it wasn't. So let's do it now. Yes, it's not gonna stop the fixed, contractual. But in 2 years, when contracts come up again, we can look at financially other things other than contractual. That's what I'm asking to have done.
And we have done that and
Okay,
continue to
but
do it.
that has not been brought to my attention. I don't know about the other board members. I mean, we hear about the academic piece. We hear what Mr. Cuck is doing at the high school and what Mr. First and the other principals are doing at the other schools, the academic piece. I'm not questioning that. I have not gotten in my packet what we're looking at to do to change our finances down the road that don't consist of contractual obligations. I have not yet heard any of it.
What about 2 years and future years of refinancing, save money? Some of the things, when you talk about what you can do in the financial aspect and not in programs. We've done 2 years of refinancing. We've increased our cooperative purchasing, that reduces expenditures. We've gone through, not in the staffing, but we've gone through, in 2 budgets now, this one projected and this current year's budget, we've cut probably $3 million out of district-wide accounts. So to me, it sounds like it's gotta be a combination. And when you're at deficits of this magnitude, and I contend, like I said, we have that contract, and we have that issue to deal with. But the fact of the matter, and everybody, and you look around, and every district has financial problems. I don't know of any district that had to deal with the impact of this 5 years of the contract. So the planning, and if you wanna talk about planning, are you talking about after this contract is up?
I'm talking about, we can't plan for contractual things now. We can't. But we can look at other things.
Right, finance.
For example, you said you cut $3 million.
We've
the last 2
refinanced for
years, yeah.
4 years.
Right, we refinanced,
Right.
everybody does.
Right.
But you cut $3 million on different line
Yeah,
items.
absolutely.
And we hear how hard that has been on teachers and other people. So, it's hard when we have to cut for different spending, this and that. That's what we hear. So my question is that something that is gonna be put back when the 2-year contractual obligation is up? What I'm saying is, we need to look at the future.
No, I
I
think.
think
Are we
another
looking to
thing that
bring
is
things back?
really important, we were, when I first came on as a superintendent, we had swaps.
Mhm.
And I said to the board, we need to get out of swaps.
Yes, absolutely.
And the board said, well, this is how we were apprised, and we were supposed to be doing this. And I said, it's a volatile market, we need to get out of it. We saved millions. That was creative. It was using your finance background and saving millions for the district.
I think
Millions.
It was the financial consultants that came to us and
I
recommended
went to them. I went to them,
Well, they came
yes.
to us, and they recommended that, so. And it also was something that was coming down by the state, that they were discouraging school districts from getting involved in swaps because of those difficult situations around them.
That was after we did it.
Yes. Sue had talked to me about that, and she made the calls to get those
I
people
did.
here.
I mean, and I'm not, I don't know. Listen, that happened how many years ago?
It was my first year as a superintendent.
Right
5 years
before-
5 years ago.
right
And I mean, and
before
that was
the
good for
market
then,
went
but I'm
sick.
talking about now. 5 years ago, I was 180 pounds. That and $1.25 is only gonna get me a bus ride to Bethlehem. So I'm talking about now. I'm talking about the future. And I'm not saying, you should have did it this way, you should have did it that way. What I'm saying is we need to look more for the future financially. We did that, or you did that 5 years ago. I'm glad it happened, whoever did it, and we're not like the county ended up with the swaption a couple months ago. So I'm glad it was done. But I'm talking about moving, continuing to keep going, moving forward without contractual obligations. That's what I'm asking to do. We hear about the academic piece, but lately, since I've been here, everything we talked about consisted of cuts and cutting teachers, and I know contractual. But I'd like to look outside of contracts at other things pertaining to finance that we can look at for down the road. So it doesn't, so then, once the contracts are up, we put a sustainable contract in place, and everything else then is now falling in place because we started working on it 2 years early. That's what I'm asking for, because you made a good move 4 or 5 years ago, but the last two, we still finished over budget.
Not over budget.
No.
The last year, the 11-12 budget, our expenditures were under the budgeted expenditures. It's the
Right.
revenues that shall.
But the revenues,
Well,
right.
So you talk about a plan, we're planning for it. We're estimating the 96%, the reality of the collections rate.
And I know you didn't estimate the 99% collections, but in the middle of the year, when you see that somebody projected 99% collections, in the middle of the year, you know we're not gonna hit that, then we need to start scrambling and find out how we're gonna make up for that, so we balance the budget at the end of
And
the
we
year.
did by underspending the budget by a couple $1 million. If you recall from the audit, we didn't have to take, the 11-12 budget was set up to take over $2 million out of surplus. So with that shortfall in revenue, we still didn't have to take out more than that $2.1 million.
But we spent it under what we expected.
We underspent the budget
Right.
by more than that $2 million. We made up for the shortfall in the estimate for the collections and other revenues. And we underspent the budget by almost $3 million.
On the
expenditure side.
Right.
Right.
But
So I'm saying is, but you're right, in the middle of the year, you see that, whoa, cut expenses, and you can talk to the principals and teachers, no, we're not buying that, no, you can't have that, do without. And as you go along these accounts, those things that are taken out, we're now 3 years in a row with expenditure line items in the supplies and stuff like that, we're at the 10, 11 spending levels. Everybody's living with it, we're staying with it. Now, if something comes up, an emergency, but everybody is
now let me
accustomed
ask
to
you, are we gonna be able to live with it and stay with it after this contract's over?
After, in 2
After
years from now?
our unsustainable contract's over? We don't know. Exactly. That's why we have to start planning now.
Well, if we're living with it now, and again, the variable there will be the enrollment. If our enrollment shoots up, we're gonna need more supplies.
Right. But what I'm saying, and all that, but you have to start laying the groundwork for 2, 3, 4 years
I think we
out.
are with our administration, and again, we can go back and forth, but I think we are. Every administrator knows the parameters of which they have to budget with. When we have meetings, look, we know we're at 10, 11 spending levels, okay, it's now going to 12, 13, well, sorry folks, you're still gonna be at 10, 11 spending levels.
And I'm not saying they're not working on it, I will say that we're not hearing it. Here's my thing, I close my eyes, I don't see the future of I don't know where the future of the district's going. I don't know. I don't know.
If you look at this budget, and
I
again,
mean,
you look at this budget, the
I
future
don't
of the
know.
district is, right now, a recommendation to, and whether it's simplistic or whatever, but the recommendation is to maintain, given the situation, maintain our programs. Yeah, we're reducing some staff, but we're still not losing, at 2.1, we're still not losing a program.
I understand.
And we come up with ways, great, we had $400,000 of state aid, but we have a property sale, that gave us money, we have a refund from the CIT, we're not just throwing that in reserve and saving.
I understand we're not cutting programs, and that's good, but we're cutting teachers. Now,
Understood.
isn't that gonna hurt the students?
Sure, at some level, yes,
No, it's not?
but we're still gonna, it may be difficult, it may be a little different for the students, but when we're not cutting programs, and the curriculum people can jump in on this anytime they want, if we're keeping the programs, might be a little harder for the staff to deliver that instruction, but I don't know if we've seen a decline in the student achievement over the last couple of years, and we have had to cut because of the contractual obligations. I don't know. I'm just saying, so I hear what you're saying about a plan for the finances, and Dr. McGinley said it, every day we're looking at purchases, the way we do things.
And
we're
I'm
changing
not
it.
saying you're not, what I'm
It's not
saying
me,
is,
it's everybody.
I'm not saying the district's not, but what I am saying is if I wait till April and then this is all I see, show me more. Okay, you're looking at it, what exactly are we looking at?
Understood.
What are we thinking
But
about?
we are not waiting until April. We
Okay,
are
but it
not-
comes to us in April, and then it looks like, all right, we're just gonna cut, get us past this year, and then next year we're in the same place. So if you are looking at things, and I'm not saying you're not, can you share a little bit with us? I mean, and I don't know, are we not allowed to know? Just let us know that we're moving that way. All I know is the last 2 years, April comes, and I'm cutting teachers, and we're raising taxes. So I'm not saying you're not looking at it, but maybe every month, one update in the Friday packet of where we're looking at financially, what we're looking to do financially down the road. Maybe you're looking at it. I'm not saying you're not.
We
I
are.
don't know about if the other board members are getting it, I'm not. So I don't see it. I just come in April and I see we're cutting teachers, we're raising taxes.
I'm gonna say this with all the respect in the world.
You don't have to.
It's a, it's a good idea to say, hey, what are you looking at, 2 years down the road financially? Quite honestly, the reality of the situation is, what we're looking at is surviving in the situation, and it's a bad word, and it's out in the public now, but we're looking at surviving on the hand that we're being dealt right now. And unfortunately, surviving includes scenarios like this, and the struggle is doing this without affecting the programs.
I understand that, and that's why I said, I know the plan again is not going to affect these papers
And
here.
maybe next year.
And maybe
because of the
next year.
financial outlook.
But if all we're doing is trying to survive, right? Now, we survived for 2 years, right? Let's say on the positive, let's look positive, we survived for 2 years. Now we're in the first fresh year, now we're gonna start planning it right then?
No, well.
That's, and you're saying you are doing it. It's being
Yes, we
done.
are.
And all I'm saying is, in our updated package, can we hear about it? I literally don't know what direction we're going in financially. All I know is we have an unsustainable contract. But I think that there's some more things other than the contract, since we've been raising taxes for 19 years. And the contract just took place a couple years ago. So all I'm saying is, can we get updates? Can I get an update? All I know finances is we're gonna cut teachers and raise taxes.
Mr. Simonetti.
That's simplistic.
But
That's
that's it, right? That's it.
Yeah, I think it's important that the board truly understands that this is a daily priority. Daily priority. There's not a day that goes by, not even on the weekend,
Okay.
that we are not doing certain aspects of the budget for academics. And I think that there really is this very strong notion that it just happened within the month. And there's no truth to that whatsoever, none.
I don't know if I gave that off, I apologize.
No, I think
you
it
know, I don't beat around, I'll
resonated,
tell
I
you.
think it resonated throughout.
But my thing is, I'm here in April. Now, you've been working on it for, let's say, since July.
We live this
Right,
every
you
day.
live it. I don't live it, right? I'm a volunteer that was put here by the taxpayers to do my best and to help out, right? I don't see this. So all I see is in April, cut 23, raise taxes 2.1, or cut 29, raise taxes 1.7. I don't see what you're looking at. I'm not asking you to show me everything you're working on. I'm not asking for that. But how about an email saying, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is what our plans are. You know, I feel like, and it could just be me, I don't see any of it. And now it's time. We need you to vote. Our recommendation, 2.1, 1.7. So, all right, that's what you want from me. I understand what you want. But show me what are we looking at in the future. I don't see that. What if you're working every day, every night, maybe once a month, one Friday a month, we can get a packet that say, hey, we're looking at doing this, we're thinking, culturally we can change this down the road, this and that. I haven't seen any of that. So I'm not saying you're not
That's
working.
programmatically or financially or both?
We're talking about programs every day. Every meeting. So
Yeah.
I see, through Mr. Cook, Mr. First, and our Schumacher and things, we're hearing about different programs, right? So I'm hearing academically, but financially, more updates as where we're looking. And I know it's hard. You guys are working on this budget. You're trying to survive. I understand that. But it's hard for me to vote on things in the dark because I don't know where we're going to be at tomorrow.
Suffice it to say, and I understand you haven't been updated on what we've done financially or some of the strides we made. But suffice it to say, we would be looking at worse than this scenario if we weren't doing things financially every day. I heard you though about updating you and stuff like that, different scenario. But as Dr. McGinley said, every day we did this, every day we're doing this, every day we're in the schools. The administration, we're looking at ways to reduce even the budgeted expenditures, not spending what's budgeted, or coming in under. So that's the everyday task. This would have been worse if we weren't doing that for, I mean, obviously we knew before I came here, but more so, and every day with the crew that we have now.
Right, and again, I'm not saying you're not doing it. What I'm saying is, let us know. Now, and we don't need to see, we don't need you to take a full day, and I don't know about everybody else, and give us every minute, take hours and do it. But let us know something other than coming in April and say, I mean, I see on the board, here's our deficit all year. And then at the end, it's, well, we're gonna cut this, cut that. What are we looking at for the long term? So we're not in this situation again. Because yes, we had no cuts before, but we were always raising taxes. So in my opinion, maybe for 20 years, 19 years, we haven't been doing the best financially. So I would just like, and I'm not saying we're not on that track now, on that path, but I think to be a responsible board member, I should be able to see and know the vision that our administrators, our super, our RCO have financially for the district.
In the long term, we know what we're looking at for this budget, we know what we're looking at for the following budget. So what's going to be the scenario next year? It's going to be reductions, and maybe we get in the program.
I understand.
We have contracts in 2 years from now. We don't know what the number's gonna end up being. We have to assume it's gonna be a lot less than it is. We don't know what that's going to hold, but as we're going through on the financial aspect, we're looking at the revenues and different ways to generate money every year. I.e., we just approved a firm new foundation to raise money to supplement some of the programs. So this will be ongoing. I mean, it is ongoing, and it will continue to be. I hear what you're saying, and we'll figure out something to present what's occurred.
Because I mean, I know we brought up
What we're doing moving
revenue
forward.
generating things, and we haven't heard about them. So I'm not saying you're not working on them,
Right.
but let us know where we're at.
Right.
You know, we've talked about things that we can implement that would generate revenue for the district. And I'm sure you guys are working on them, but we bring it up a year ago, we don't hear anything, it looks like nothing's being done. Let us know, give us an idea that, you know what, hey, that thing that we agreed to do, we're moving on it, or we're, you know, let us know we're doing something. That when we talk and there's a dialogue and we know it's, you know what I mean, we're getting feedback, we're seeing what's happening, and that's it, because I sit down, this is all I see. They want me to cut more and they want me to raise taxes.
Mike, I would say, in keeping with Mr. Pinnabone, is a pinpoint list of, and this goes for Dr. McGinley too, of just what we've done in the past to try to eliminate the budget, and what we're gonna do, what we're looking at in the future. And they could just be, you know, line items going down, because that's all we could plan. I mean, again, we're when we look at salaries and contracts and so forth, we can't plan for those, because that's an unknown. We can only plan for what we know, and plan for that 88, that 12% right now that we have open. But if you gave us a list of what both of you have done, and I know what Dr. McGinley has done and you have done in bringing in some of these programs, and then what we've done in the past, and then what we project in the future, I think that will solve everything. And, you know, I don't know if that's gonna, that
I
won't.
don't think it's going to solve everything.
No, it will solve the problem that Mr. Pinnabone and maybe some other board members are thinking of what has been done.
I'll make it a
And
little
what's
easier.
going to be
You don't
done.
even have to jot down the past.
Well,
Let's look at the future, what our goals are for the future.
well, the past is important because some of that
But I mean,
money
it
is
doesn't matter now.
that is being used now. I mean, what we got in the past is being used now. That's
Right.
why
But I'm
we
more worried
have
about
to.
what we're doing for the future.
Well, I understand that. It's good that you want to, what we're gonna do for the future, but we have to know where some of our money is coming in from now, is coming in now from what we did a year or two ago. That's important.
I'm done.
So I think we have to,
Any other questions for Mr. Simonetta? You've been busy tonight, Michael.
Finance.
Anything
You
else you
didn't
need
go
to
through the
touch
whole
upon?
PowerPoint.
I
Mike,
mean, do we want to?
I do want to
Mike,
go
is
through
there
the
anything
whole
else you need to touch
PowerPoint.
upon?
Yeah, I would just, I mean, we gotta figure out, obviously, what we wanna do for Tuesday, and again, it's a preliminary budget, but let me just finish. So, when you, yeah, the revised budget slide. So, we started out at 3.4% increase. We're now looking at a just over 1% increase in the total budget. With, again, this is all at a 2.1 increase. I just showed the screen before. We picked out 2 areas as far as significant increases to the budget. So when you go back and look at the budget going up as a total, 1.4 million, and 2 areas are easily identified at almost 4 million. You know, obviously, there's the cuts, but it's not just in the staffing. And again, we try to look at attrition when we're talking about the staffing cuts for this budget. There's 2 areas, there's nothing we can do about that. That's the obligations of the contractual obligations with the Social Security and the pension. And then we talked about the share of the budget and what's driving it and the salaries. We've seen this screen, this did not change much from last year. The salaries versus the total budget. And this is just the salary and pension. This is not medical, this is not Social Security, other obligations referencing the salaries. The remaining budget, that 48%, including in that, we talked about, we're at about 88% of fixed cost and about 12% of the budget that we can really play with and reduce elsewhere. And this is where we left off with the screen. There are the salary increases that were requested over the last 4 years. So we go to the proposed budget. The actual expenditures in 11-12, the current budget, and then of course where we started at November, the revised budget at 2.1% is just a little over $2 million more than what we spent 2 years ago. And if you go back to the screen from the previous year, the contractual, we have $4 million for next year of increases. I believe that number last year was around $4.5 million increases as well. So of the contractual increases in the last 2 budgets. So there's $8 million of contractual obligations that we had to increase, but yet we're only budgeting for $2 million more than what was spent 2 years ago. And the revenue, we talked about, if you look at the local number, again, 2.1% would normally generate a lot more than $400,000. That's all it's generating based on a more realistic collections rate. And then that also, if you look at the fund transfer, it's asking for an additional $500,000 from the fund balance. And again, we talked about this area. If you go to 1.7, we'll need another $325,000. If you go to 0, we'll need an additional $1.4 million on that from where we're at now. I will say, I mean, it came up last meeting about 1.5, 1.9. Basically, we're generating about, for every 1/10 of a percent, it's about $80,000. Generating tax revenue.
So, Mike, you're saying that basically 1 mil brings in about $1 million?
1 mil brings in, yeah, well.
Close to $1
yeah,
million,
on the
give or
collection
take.
rate.
Okay.
The tax levy impact, this didn't change from previous slides. $68 on the average assessment of 2.1. 1.7, it's a $12 decrease on the annual impact. And then there's the fund balance. The committed is the money for this year, and it's already appropriated. That's the assigned, which we're asking to take $1 million out for next year. This is the unassigned, which is basically free for the district to do it. This number, again, was 3.6 last year. So we actually, from the 11-12 school year, based on under expenditure of budgeted money, we're able to generate additional surplus back in. And the last page is, again, continuing to work daily. We were looking at adoption of a preliminary budget in April with the final budget in May. If the board wishes to change that, obviously, we have till June 30th to review the final budget. So what we'll be looking at is a direction from the board. I mean, what I plan on doing, if we were to put on the agenda for the, well, we'll still put on the agenda, the adoption of the preliminary budget, but I will come with those three scenarios again, like I did last year with the three resolutions. And if we move forward with passing it, again, it can be changed up until the final budget. That will certainly be up to the board. And we will, as I said, for every 0.1% difference, it's about $80,000. Further discussion and questions?
For next Tuesday, Mike, will there be more granularity that the board has asked for with regards to the proposed cuts, programs, et cetera?
I think, and Dr. McGinnis can answer to the personnel aspect of it. At this point, it's still being fleshed out, but I think the final budget proposal is when the final details need to be deliberated. I think that was the scenario of last year as well. It was numbers on the staffing, and then the final determination was.
So we'll have a month in between before
Yes.
the numbers to the actual plan.
You will.
The adoption can be changed.
The,
Once if we
the
adopt
tax
it.
rate can't be, but the plan can
Yes,
be.
yes.
I'm sorry,
The tax rate can't be changed.
if
If they
we-
adopt 2.1 or 1.7 or 0,
that can't go down for the final budget?
it can never go down. I mean, 0 is 0, so obviously.
No, if the board, if the preliminary budget is adopted at 2.1.
It could go down, it can't go up, I'm
Right.
sorry.
It could go down, it can't go
Okay,
up.
that's what
I'm
I just wanted to
sorry.
clarify, yeah.
Only if you have modifications.
Yes.
So we can adopt the preliminary budget at 2.1 and finalize it at 0,
Right,
if the board so chose.
okay. Any questions for Mr. Simonetta? Any additional questions for Mr. Simonetta? Any public comment on agenda items? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In the recent past, your solicitor has helped you in an amazing way. Fixed costs and contract costs have become variable costs. And I'm tired of hearing that these things are fixed because you have far greater latitude than you had before. And they may be inconveniences, but they're not fixed. They are all subject to all kinds of debate. Mr. Pinnebaum, you're setting your sights too low. You're going to be sitting there doing the same thing 3 years from now unless you take the initiative that some of the upper middle management team is operating in the past and they're applying the same old Band-Aids to the same old problems, and we can't afford to have old Band-Aids on the old problems. Therefore, we will change battalion commanders. I'm not saying which ones, but some. Because if you don't, you'll be making the same comments. Dr. Lettis, you're understating the problem. I had about a 4'7" elementary teacher, now retired, written me a new one because I started to chastise her a little bit about how she could manage a class of 50 to 55. And she all of a sudden swelled up to about 6'8", and she said, let me tell you, she didn't need a guidance counselor, she didn't need an administrative assistant, she didn't need a co-teacher, she didn't need all of this. And she said, now I will tell you the names of every single student who went through my class, and I'll tell you where they all are today. Because she turned out a good product in a class of 50 to 55. My fear is that if you start increasing class sizes, that the good students will wind up in a class of 70, and you'll still have the same old Band-Aids with classes of 15. You need to focus on the class of 15 and get them up to 50, or whatever the number is. But I can pontificate on changes in the tax code and the money going to New York. It won't get changed. But let me talk about some things that you can change that are variable today. And the contract you set with an incoming leader will carry out the impact on the rest of the staff. Specifically, I think you need to change the contract or make sure that it contains no goodies that you aren't proud to address. And by that I mean no spousal health care. Okay? That went to Dodo Bird a couple years ago in the public sector. And you can't sell it to the rank and file, the person at the top has it. So I don't care about the person at the top. I care about your ability to sell it up and down the chain of command as you're tightening the ship. And under Obamacare, spousal protection is not in the equation. If you want a job, that is. But you can't have a Cadillac. You can have a Buick. Okay. But more importantly, I haven't heard a single creative thought in certain areas. Now, under Obamacare, if you work less than 30 hours a week, we can strip out health care. We're currently paying approximately $13 per hour to have a teacher stand in the classroom. Your solicitor can make that go away. Now, you may pay the person more. I'm not saying pay them less, but you're not going to be paying them $13 an hour to stand there and suck up health care. PSERS says if you work more than 25 hours, you're still full-time. That's a sweet spot between the two regulations which don't agree with each other. Under FMLA, there's an advisory from about 10 years ago which says if you work 3 hours a day times 180 days, you're not covered. But if you work 6.5 hours a day times 180 days, you are covered. So basically speaking, an employee who works between 25 and 30 hours a week would be covered for the important things. They're just not going to get health care. Now, take it out. Now, I've got friends that work 90 to 100-hour weeks. Nothing says you can't work 3 jobs, different places, and make a heck of a lot of money. Or work 1 job. And nothing says you have to be inside a brick and mortar classroom, riding a bus, and having a cafeteria. Well, nothing says a teacher has to be standing here in front of a class of 50. The teacher could be at the other end of an electronic device on a different schedule. And some might be perfectly happy working 29.9 hours per week and getting paid quite well to do so, and you've saved something like $6 million. Now, I don't have an original thought. Community College of Allegheny is doing that. Ball State is doing it. Many other employers are doing it, and they're stripping it out. So I'm suggesting you've got $5 million that you can take out of your budget by creative deployment of your existing resources. And if they don't like it, change. The world is changing. Yesterday's solutions are passé. And I'm older than some of you guys that are doing yesterday's solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Summary was budget, correct? Thank you.
There were a couple more things, but
Could I just ask a
pale by
one
comparison.
question?
One question, you're done
Okay.
then, Pat. We're cutting you
Yes,
off.
That's fine. Mike, have we looked into, or are we doing the fact that if an employee has benefits from their spouse, are we paying them not to take our benefits?
Currently, we are not.
Okay, because I will tell you that in New Jersey, I have a friend who spouse works in Pennsylvania, gets full benefits, has to pay, $60 a month for her husband to work there. But in not taking those benefits, he gets $1,500 a semester for not taking those benefits. So we're paying $3,000, they're paying $3,000 versus $8,000 or $9,000. That's a big savings. Now that's creative coding.
Right.
And I brought this up several times in this district, and the board keeps on shooting it down. This is a way to save $5,000 for everybody who gives it up.
Well, at the risk of not trying to shoot it down,
Right.
I do have experience with a buyout option, opt-out option.
In New Jersey, that's quite common, I was told.
In our case here, where we're self-insured,
Right.
and again, there's no actuary analysis, but what was anticipated, because I have discussed it with our benefits consultants, the advantage will be to the person opting out, crossing the district. Typically, and especially the self-insured scenario, because we're not paying a premium base, we don't have an exact $12,000 for that employee
Right.
cost. Typically, it's the employee that doesn't use the benefits, and aren't costing the district the money, that will opt out, and take the cash. So we are looking at that, and we are analyzing that every year with the renewals and seeing on the claims and stuff like that. But at this point, being self-insured and having a stopgap insurance, it has not been the recommendation to do that for this district. I have
Okay.
done it in the past.
But I think we should look at that in the
We look
future.
at it every year.
That's a plan that would be suitable to Frank, yes.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Do you have the public on non-agenda items?
I mentioned.
Don't care.